The night was calm, with only the faint hum of crickets breaking the silence in the quiet suburban neighborhood. A police cruiser rolled slowly down the empty street, its headlights cutting through the darkness. The officers inside had received a call about suspicious activity near an old, abandoned warehouse at the edge of town. It wasn't uncommon for such reports to come in. Kids sneaking around, homeless individuals seeking shelter, or even criminals using the space for illegal dealings. But tonight felt different somehow. As they approached the warehouse, their attention was drawn to a lone figure standing near the entrance. He was a tall black man, dressed in a dark hoodie and jeans, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. His head was bowed slightly, as if he were lost in thought. The officers exchanged glances. Something about him seemed off. Why would someone be hanging around this place late at night? They decided to investigate further. Pulling up beside him, one officer stepped out of the car, flashlight in hand. "Sir, can we have a word with you?" he called out, his voice firm but not aggressive. The man raised his head slowly, his face partially hidden by the shadow of his hood. He didn't say anything at first, just stared back at them with an unreadable expression. There was no sign of fear or panic, only a strange calmness that made the officers uneasy. "Is there a problem, officer?" the man finally asked, his tone measured and polite. His voice carried a hint of curiosity, as though he genuinely wanted to understand why they were there. "We got a call about someone acting suspiciously around here," the officer replied, shining the light directly at the man's face. "Can you tell us what you're doing?" The man hesitated for a moment before answering. "I'm just looking," he said vaguely, glancing toward the warehouse. "It's an interesting building." His answer did little to ease the officer's suspicions. "Looking for what?" The second officer chimed in, now stepping closer. "Do you live around here? Do you have ID?" The man shook his head. "No ID on me," he said simply, his hands still tucked safely in his pockets. His calm demeanor was starting to unnerve the officers even more. Most people would be defensive or nervous in this situation, but he seemed almost detached, like he was observing them instead of the other way around. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us," the first officer said firmly, reaching for his handcuffs. "You can explain yourself down at the station." Without protest, the man extended his wrists, allowing the cuffs to be secured without so much as a flinch. As he climbed into the back seat of the cruiser, the officers couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't adding up. Who was this man? Why was he so composed? And why did it feel like they were missing something important? Little did they know, the answers to those questions would leave them stunned and force them to confront uncomfortable truths about their own assumptions. At the police station, the atmosphere was a mix of routine and unease. The officers led the man to a small holding area while they began processing him. He sat quietly on a metal bench, his hands cuffed in front of him, watching as one officer typed information into a computer and another rifled through his belongings. There wasn't much to go through. A wallet with no identification, a few crumpled dollar bills, and a single business card that looked oddly out of place. The lack of ID puzzled the officers. Most people carried some form of identification, even if it was just a library card or an expired gym membership, but this man, nothing. It was almost as if he didn't want to be traced, or worse, as if he had something to hide. One officer muttered under his breath, "No ID, vague answers, doesn't look good for him." As they continued their search, opinions about the man began to swirl among the team. Some thought he might be homeless, explaining both his disheveled appearance and lack of documentation. Others leaned toward the idea that he could be mentally unstable, given how eerily calm he remained despite being arrested. After all, most people would at least try to argue or plead their case. Not him. He simply sat there, observing everything with quiet detachment. But there was something else, something harder to put into words. Despite his casual clothing and unassuming demeanor, the man carried himself with a certain air of dignity. His posture was straight, his movements deliberate, and his voice carried a clarity that felt unusual for someone in his position. It was subtle, but it made the officers hesitate, even if only for a moment. Was it possible they were wrong about him? Their suspicions deepened when they examined the business card more closely. It was sleek and professional looking, unlike anything you'd expect from someone involved in shady dealings. Printed neatly in bold letters were the words, Dr. Marcus Johnson, Ph.D., neuroscientist and inventor. Below that was an address for a well-known research institute downtown and a phone number. Neuroscientist. One officer scoffed, tossing the card onto the desk. Yeah, right. What kind of scientist hangs around abandoned warehouses in the middle of the night? Another officer shrugged. Maybe it's fake. Or maybe he stole it from someone. Still, curiosity got the better of them. Someone decided to call the number listed on the card, half expecting it to lead nowhere. To everyone's surprise, a cheerful voice answered on the other end. Good evening. Thank you for calling the Advanced Research Institute. How may I assist you? The officer hesitated before speaking. Hi. I'm trying to verify some information. Does a Dr. Marcus Johnson work there? There was a brief pause, followed by a laugh. Of course. Dr. Johnson is one of our leading researchers. Are you looking to schedule an interview or perhaps discuss a collaboration? The officer's stomach sank. No. We're actually detaining someone who claims to be him. Can you confirm his identity? The receptionist grew serious. Detained. That's alarming. Let me check. She placed the officer on hold for what felt like an eternity. When she returned, her tone was firm. Yes, Dr. Marcus Johnson works here. He's highly respected in his field. Is everything all right? The room fell silent as the officer hung up the phone. Everyone exchanged glances, the weight of their mistake sinking in. This wasn't just any man. They had arrested someone who was clearly important, someone whose name carried weight far beyond their little town. And yet, none of them could figure out why such a person would act so strangely. Questions swirled in their minds. Who exactly was Dr. Marcus Johnson? Why hadn't he defended himself earlier? And what was he really doing at that warehouse? The pieces didn't fit together, and the more they tried to make sense of it, the more confused and uneasy they became. The room buzzed with tension as the officers huddled around the desk, staring at the business card like it held some kind of secret code. None of them wanted to believe what they were hearing. A neuroscientist, an inventor. It sounded too far-fetched, too out of place for the quiet suburban neighborhood where they'd found him. But the receptionist's voice still echoed in their minds, calm, professional, and utterly certain about Dr. Marcus Johnson's identity. One officer grabbed his phone and started searching online. If this guy is who he says he is, there should be something about him, he muttered under his breath. Within seconds, results poured in. Photos of a tall, distinguished man wearing a lab coat appeared on the screen. He was standing beside rows of complex machinery, shaking hands with government officials, or speaking at conferences in front of large audiences. The resemblance to the man sitting in their holding cell was uncanny. Look at this, another officer said, pointing to an article from a major newspaper. The headline read, Dr. Marcus Johnson revolutionizes AI technology with groundbreaking invention. Below it was a detailed description of his work, a project aimed at developing advanced tools to detect structural weaknesses in old buildings, potentially saving lives by preventing collapses. The officers scrolled through more articles, each one painting the same picture. Dr. Johnson wasn't just a scientist. He was a pioneer, someone whose contributions had earned national recognition. But none of that explained why he'd been near the abandoned warehouse, or why he hadn't mentioned any of this during the arrest. Frustrated and confused, the lead officer decided to confront him directly. All right, he said, walking back into the holding area. We've got some questions. Dr. Johnson looked up calmly, his expression unchanged. I figured you would, he replied, his tone steady. This business card, the officer began, holding it up. It says you're a neuroscientist. Is that true? Yes, Dr. Johnson answered simply, "I'm also an inventor. I specialize in artificial intelligence and its applications in public safety. And this research institute downtown, you really work there?" "I do," he confirmed. "You can call them again if you need further verification." The officer hesitated, unsure how to proceed. "Then what were you doing at that warehouse tonight? What's your connection to it?" Dr. Johnson leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking onto the officer's. "I was conducting field tests for a prototype device, a tool designed to scan structures for hidden damage. That particular warehouse has been flagged as structurally unsound, and I wanted to see if my invention could identify potential risks before it becomes a hazard." His explanation was clear and logical, but it only deepened the officer's discomfort. They had assumed he was up to no good based solely on his appearance and location. Now, faced with the truth, they couldn't ignore the glaring flaws in their judgment. "So, you're telling us you're not involved in anything illegal?" the officer asked, though the question felt hollow even to him. "No," Dr. Johnson said firmly. "I'm not. My work is funded by grants and supported by both private organizations and the government. If you'd like, I can provide documentation." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Everything he said checked out. Yet the realization hit hard. They had arrested a brilliant scientist in the middle of important work because of assumptions rooted in bias. The weight of their mistake pressed down on them, heavy and undeniable. For the first time, they saw the man not as a suspect, but as someone whose expertise could have saved lives, including theirs, if they hadn't jumped to conclusions. As the gravity of the situation settled over the room, one thing became painfully clear. This wasn't just an error in judgment. It was a wake-up call, one that would force them to confront uncomfortable truths about how quickly stereotypes could cloud perception and lead to devastating consequences. The story of Dr. Marcus Johnson's arrest didn't stay confined to the walls of the police station for long. By morning, it had spilled into the public eye, thanks to a security camera mounted near the abandoned warehouse. The grainy footage showed everything. The officers approaching him, the calm way he responded to their questions, and the moment he was handcuffed without resistance. Someone leaked the video online, and within hours, it went viral. Social media erupted like a storm. Hashtags like #JusticeForMarcus and #WrongfulArrest trended across platforms, drawing attention from people all over the country. Comment sections buzzed with outrage. Why did they assume he was guilty? One user wrote, "Just because he's black and standing near a building. That's not a crime." Others shared articles about Dr. Johnson's groundbreaking work, highlighting his achievements and the lives his inventions could save. Memes began circulating, showing side-by-side images of Dr. Johnson in a lab coat next to the photo of him in handcuffs. The contrast was stark and damning. News outlets picked up the story quickly, eager to capitalize on the growing controversy. Reporters flocked to the police department, microphones in hand, demanding answers. Local activists organized protests outside the station, holding signs that read, "Stop racial profiling," and "Respect, not suspicion." The crowd chanted loudly, their voices echoing through the streets. "Say his name. Marcus Johnson." Passersby joined in, swelling the numbers until the scene became impossible to ignore. Inside the station, the officers involved felt the pressure mounting. Calls poured in, angry citizens, concerned community leaders, even officials from the research institute where Dr. Johnson worked. Everyone wanted to know how such a mistake could happen. The police chief called an emergency meeting with his team, his face red with frustration. "This is a disaster," he said, slamming a stack of papers onto the table. "We look incompetent. Worse, we look biased." Meanwhile, Dr. Johnson remained silent. Unlike many others in his position, he chose not to give interviews or fuel the fire with emotional statements. Instead, he focused on cooperating fully with the investigation, answering questions calmly and providing evidence to support his claims. His quiet dignity only added to the public's admiration. People saw him as a symbol of resilience, a man who refused to let bitterness take root despite being wrongfully treated. But the scrutiny wasn't limited to the officers directly involved. Questions arose about broader issues within law enforcement. Why had no one stopped to verify his identity before arresting him? Why had his calm demeanor been interpreted as suspicious rather than reassuring? Critics pointed out that if Dr. Johnson hadn't been a high-profile figure, the mistake might have gone unnoticed, or worse, escalated into something far more dangerous. As the days passed, the narrative shifted slightly. While anger still simmered, many began calling for action instead of just outrage. Community leaders urged the police department to implement better training programs, especially around implicit bias and cultural sensitivity. Schools hosted discussions about systemic racism, using Dr. Johnson's case as a real-world example. Even late-night talk show hosts weighed in, using humor to highlight the absurdity of profiling someone based on race or appearance. Through it all, Dr. Johnson stayed focused on what mattered most to him, moving forward. He understood the importance of addressing the issue, but also knew that change wouldn't come overnight. For now, he hoped his experience would spark meaningful conversations and perhaps inspire others to challenge their own assumptions about people they encounter every day. Though the spotlight burned brightly, Dr. Johnson carried himself with grace, proving once again that true strength lies not in retaliation, but in rising above adversity with purpose and poise. The pressure on the police department reached a boiling point as the public demanded accountability. Protesters gathered daily outside the station, their chants growing louder and more insistent. News cameras captured every moment, broadcasting images of frustrated citizens holding signs that read "Bias has no place in policing" and "Apologies aren't enough." The officers involved in Dr. Marcus Johnson's arrest found themselves at the center of a national firestorm, their faces plastered across newspapers and TV screens. For the first time, they felt the full weight of their actions and the consequences of jumping to conclusions. Finally, after days of mounting tension, the police chief stepped forward to address the situation publicly. Standing behind a podium flanked by microphones, he looked visibly uneasy as reporters fired questions at him before he even began speaking. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with regret. "On behalf of this department, I want to extend our deepest apologies to Dr. Marcus Johnson," he said, pausing to let the words sink in. "What happened was unacceptable, and we are taking immediate steps to ensure it never happens again." He went on to outline the disciplinary actions being taken against the officers involved. Some would face suspensions, others would undergo mandatory sensitivity training. Additionally, the department announced plans to implement new protocols for verifying identities during stops and detentions. These measures were met with mixed reactions. Some praised the effort as a step in the right direction, while others dismissed it as too little, too late. Dr. Marcus Johnson finally broke his silence shortly after the press conference. In a brief but powerful statement released through his lawyer, he expressed gratitude for the outpouring of support from the community. "I am humbled by the attention my case has received," he wrote. "However, I urge everyone to remember that systemic issues cannot be solved by focusing on one incident alone. Real change requires commitment, education, and action." His words resonated deeply, striking a chord with people across the country. Many admired his ability to rise above bitterness and focus on solutions rather than blame. Even those who had initially doubted his innocence now saw him not just as a victim, but as a leader, a man using his experience to advocate for something greater than himself. In the weeks that followed, Dr. Johnson became a central figure in discussions about racial profiling and justice reform. Community leaders invited him to speak at town halls and panel discussions, eager to hear his perspective on how to address these pervasive issues. He didn't shy away from sharing his story, often recounting the night of his arrest with calm clarity. "When they cuffed me," he told one audience, "I could see the assumptions forming in their minds. But what hurt most wasn't the arrest. It was knowing that those assumptions weren't unique to me." They happen every day, to countless people whose names you'll never know. His message struck a nerve, sparking conversations in homes, schools, and workplaces. People began reflecting on their own biases, asking difficult questions about why they made snap judgments based on appearance or behavior. Educators incorporated his story into lesson plans, teaching students about empathy and critical thinking. Even some law enforcement agencies reached out, seeking guidance on how to improve relations with marginalized communities. As momentum grew, Dr. Johnson partnered with civil rights organizations to launch initiatives aimed at combating racial bias. One program focused on providing free STEM education to underserved youth, hoping to inspire the next generation of innovators. Another sought to create dialogue between police departments and local communities, fostering mutual understanding and trust. Through these efforts, he transformed a painful chapter in his life into an opportunity for progress. Though the scars of that night remained, for him, for the officers involved, and for the nation watching, the ripple effects of his resilience continued to spread. Dr. Marcus Johnson wasn't just rebuilding his reputation, he was helping to rebuild a broken system, one conversation, and one action at a time. And in doing so, he reminded everyone that even in moments of injustice, there is always room for hope, growth, and change. The apology from the police department and the subsequent reforms they promised were important steps, but Dr. Marcus Johnson knew that apologies alone couldn't fix the deeper issues at play. He understood that true change required more than just words. It needed action, commitment, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. With his newfound platform, he decided to take matters into his own hands, channeling his experience into something transformative. One of his first moves was to partner with local civil rights organizations to host a series of community forums. These events brought together people from all walks of life: police officers, activists, educators, and everyday citizens, to have honest conversations about bias, trust, and accountability. At these gatherings, Dr. Johnson shared his story candidly, not to cast blame, but to highlight how quickly assumptions could lead to harm. "I wasn't angry when they arrested me," he told one crowd. "I was sad, not for myself, but for them, because they missed an opportunity to see me as a person, and that's what we need to change." His calm yet powerful presence made a lasting impression on those who attended. Many left the forums feeling inspired to examine their own biases and take active steps toward fostering understanding in their communities. Some officers even approached him afterward, thanking him for opening their eyes to perspectives they hadn't considered before. It wasn't easy for them to admit fault, but Dr. Johnson's grace gave them the courage to do so. Beyond the forums, Dr. Johnson turned his attention to education, an area he believed held immense potential for creating long-term change. He launched a program called STEM Futures, aimed at providing free science and technology workshops to underserved youth. The initiative focused on Black and minority students, groups often overlooked in STEM fields. "We can't talk about justice without addressing access," he explained during an interview. "If we want equality, we need to ensure everyone has the tools to succeed." Through STEM Futures, students learned coding, robotics, and engineering basics, guided by mentors who looked like them and understood their struggles. For many kids, it was the first time they'd ever seen themselves represented in fields they once thought were out of reach. Parents expressed gratitude, saying the program gave their children hope and a sense of purpose they hadn't felt before. Dr. Johnson also worked closely with law enforcement agencies to develop training modules focused on cultural sensitivity and de-escalation techniques. He collaborated with experts in psychology and sociology to create realistic scenarios that challenged officers to think critically about their assumptions. During one session, participants role-played situations similar to his arrest, forcing them to consider alternative approaches to handling unknown individuals. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, with many officers admitting the exercises changed how they viewed their interactions with the public. Despite the progress, resistance lingered in some corners. Not everyone welcomed his efforts. Critics accused him of overstepping or trying to rewrite policing practices. But Dr. Johnson remained undeterred. He knew change wouldn't come easily, especially in systems resistant to it. Instead of engaging in arguments, he focused on building bridges, proving through actions rather than words that collaboration was possible. As months passed, the impact of his advocacy became undeniable. Schools began implementing anti-bias curricula inspired by his work. Police departments reported improved relationships with minority communities thanks to his training programs. Even policymakers started drafting legislation aimed at reducing racial profiling and increasing accountability in law enforcement. Through it all, Dr. Marcus Johnson never lost sight of why he was doing this. It wasn't about revenge or personal gain. It was about creating a better future, one where no one would face judgment based solely on their appearance or circumstances. His journey from wrongful arrest to becoming a beacon of hope showed the world that adversity, when met with resilience, could spark real and lasting transformation. And though the road ahead was still long, he walked it with unwavering determination, inspiring countless others to join him along the way. Inspired by the overwhelming response to his case, Dr. Marcus Johnson dedicated himself fully to turning adversity into advocacy. He realized that his experience was more than just a personal injustice. It was a reflection of systemic issues that affected countless lives every day. With renewed purpose, he poured his energy into initiatives designed to dismantle barriers and uplift marginalized voices. One of his most impactful projects was the creation of the Justice Through Innovation Foundation. This nonprofit organization focused on addressing racial bias in policing, while also promoting STEM education as a pathway to empowerment. The foundation quickly gained traction, attracting donations from corporations, philanthropists, and ordinary citizens who were moved by Dr. Johnson's story. Grants were awarded to schools in underserved neighborhoods, funding everything from robotics clubs to science fairs. For many students, this support opened doors they never thought possible, giving them the confidence to dream bigger and aim higher. Dr. Johnson didn't stop there. Recognizing the importance of representation, he launched a mentorship program called Pathfinders, connecting young Black students with professionals working in STEM fields. These mentors weren't just teachers, they were role models who showed participants what success looked like beyond stereotypes and societal limitations. When you see someone who looks like you achieving great things, Dr. Johnson often said, it changes what you believe is possible for yourself. His advocacy extended beyond education and into policy reform. Working alongside lawmakers, civil rights groups, and community leaders, Dr. Johnson helped draft legislation aimed at increasing transparency and accountability within law enforcement agencies. One landmark bill required officers to undergo annual training on implicit bias and cultural competency. Another mandated body cameras for all police departments statewide, ensuring greater oversight and public trust. Though passing these laws wasn't easy, facing pushback from critics who claimed it would hinder police work, Dr. Johnson persisted, using data and personal anecdotes to make a compelling case for change. But perhaps his most powerful tool was storytelling. Dr. Johnson traveled across the country, speaking at conferences, universities, and town halls about his journey. His speeches weren't filled with anger or bitterness. Instead, they carried a message of hope and resilience. He spoke about the night of his arrest, not as a moment of defeat, but as a catalyst for growth. That experience taught me something, he told one audience. It taught me that we can either let setbacks define us, or we can use them to redefine the world around us. People listened. His words resonated deeply, sparking conversations in living rooms, classrooms, and boardrooms. Teachers began incorporating his story into lesson plans, showing students how one person's courage could inspire collective action. Lawmakers referenced his testimony during debates on criminal justice reform. Even late-night talk show hosts invited him to share his perspective, bringing his message to millions of viewers who might not have otherwise engaged with such topics. As momentum grew, so did partnerships. Corporations eager to align themselves with meaningful causes joined forces with the Justice Through Innovation Foundation. Tech giants offered internships to students participating in Dr. Johnson's programs, providing real-world experience and networking opportunities. Media outlets produced documentaries highlighting his work, amplifying its reach even further. Each collaboration strengthened the movement, proving that when people came together with shared goals, real progress was achievable. Despite the accolades and recognition, Dr. Johnson remained humble. He frequently reminded audiences that he was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. "This isn't about me," he emphasized time and again. "It's about all of us working together to create a fairer, more equitable society." That humility only deepened the respect people had for him, turning admiration into action. Volunteers signed up to help run workshops. Donors contributed funds to expand outreach efforts. Activists used his framework to tackle similar issues in their own communities. Through it all, Dr. Marcus Johnson stood as a testament to the power of resilience and grace under pressure. What started as a single wrongful arrest had blossomed into a nationwide movement, a beacon of hope for those fighting against inequality and injustice. And though challenges still lay ahead, he faced them with unwavering determination, knowing that every step forward brought the world closer to the future he envisioned, one where everyone, regardless of race or background, could thrive without fear of prejudice holding them back. Years passed, but the legacy of Dr. Marcus Johnson only grew stronger with time. His name became synonymous not just with scientific brilliance, but also with resilience, dignity, and a relentless pursuit of justice. The wrongful arrest that once threatened to overshadow his achievements instead became the defining moment of his life, a turning point that inspired countless others to believe in the possibility of change. Schools across the country began naming facilities after him, from libraries to science labs. One high school in his hometown even established the Dr. Marcus Johnson Scholarship Fund, awarding annual grants to students pursuing careers in STEM fields. Recipients weren't chosen solely based on academic merit. They were also evaluated on their commitment to giving back to their communities. Dr. Johnson taught us that success isn't just about personal achievement. One scholarship winner said during an acceptance speech, "It's about using your gifts to lift others up." Beyond education, his influence reached into the halls of power. The legislative reforms he championed served as models for other states grappling with similar issues. Cities nationwide adopted policies requiring implicit bias training for law enforcement officers, while community policing programs flourished under new guidelines emphasizing trust and transparency. Lawmakers often cited Dr. Johnson's advocacy when introducing bills aimed at reducing systemic inequality. "We stand on the shoulders of giants like Dr. Johnson," one senator declared during a congressional hearing, "who remind us that progress is possible when we confront uncomfortable truths." His impact wasn't limited to institutions or policies. It touched individual lives in profound ways. Former police officers who had attended his training sessions credited him with changing how they approached their work. "I used to think I knew what being a good cop meant," one officer admitted in a televised interview. "But Dr. Johnson made me realize that true service starts with seeing people, not labels." Others spoke of how his calm demeanor and unwavering optimism gave them hope during difficult times, reminding them that empathy could bridge even the widest divides. Even outside formal settings, Dr. Johnson's story continued to inspire everyday acts of courage and kindness. Parents shared his journey with their children, teaching them the importance of standing strong in the face of adversity. Teachers incorporated his speeches into lesson plans, encouraging students to reflect on their own biases and aspirations. Social media buzzed with tributes on the anniversary of his arrest, with hashtags like #LegacyOfMarcus trending annually. People posted photos of themselves participating in volunteer projects, attending workshops, or mentoring youth, all inspired by his example. As the years went by, Dr. Johnson himself remained deeply involved in his advocacy work, though he did so quietly, without seeking the spotlight. He often said that true leadership wasn't about taking credit, but about empowering others to lead. This philosophy earned him widespread admiration, making him a trusted voice in discussions about equality and innovation. When asked about his proudest accomplishment, he always gave the same answer: knowing that my story has helped someone else find their voice. In 2035, a major motion picture was released based on his life, titled Resilience. The film captured both the challenges he faced and the triumphs he achieved, bringing his story to audiences around the world. Critics praised its portrayal of grace under pressure, calling it a powerful reminder of humanity's capacity for growth and redemption. Proceeds from the movie went directly to the Justice Through Innovation Foundation, ensuring that his work would continue long after the credits rolled. By the time Dr. Marcus Johnson retired from public life, his contributions had reshaped not only his community but society as a whole. Streets bore his name, statues honored his memory, and textbooks included chapters detailing his fight for justice. Yet perhaps his greatest legacy was the countless individuals who carried forward his mission. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things because they believed as he did. That change begins with action. Dr. Johnson's journey proved that even in moments of injustice, there is always room for hope. His life was a testament to the idea that adversity, when met with purpose and perseverance, can spark a chain reaction of positive transformation. And though he may have started as just one man, his legacy would endure forever, as a symbol of resilience, a beacon of progress, and a reminder that no challenge is too great when faced with courage and compassion.